27 on the Lackawanna Cut-Off. Countdown of the top 27 sites on the Lackawanna Cut-Off. Hi, I'm Chuck Walsh, and I'm not going to tell you exactly where we are yet, but we're going to be doing a countdown of the 27 sites which I've ranked using criteria to try to come up with from number 27 all the way, or 27 all the way to number 1. Now, what were the criteria that you would use in order to determine that? Is this sort of like the top 27 sites of the cutoff that you visit before you die? Hopefully everybody's okay and we don't have to worry about that. But in terms of thinking of that, well, and we've been thinking about actually doing this episode for quite some time, is, well, how do you rank these things? Well, you could do them subjectively, and in a sense it is subjective, but I did use 4 criteria and then saw how it all came out, using 25 points for each one, possibly up to 25, 0 to 25. First one was significance of a particular site. The second would be, in other words, significant in historical, but significant to the railroad as well. Now, you could argue that any piece of the right-of-way, the 28.5 miles of the cutoff, any piece is important, but some pieces were more important than others. So that's how I distinguished for that particular criteria. The second would be, well, what about the accessibility to that particular site? Well, I'll tell you, the accessibility to where we are right now is terrible. I'm covered with mud, as my videographer is as well. So that certainly, I thought, played into the should be playing into the ranking as to, well, would you want to be able or want to visit a site that was very difficult to get to. The third site was, well, what does it look like now? In other words, does it look anything like it was when it was built, when the cutoff opened? That kind of thing. Or has it aged well, or is it there at all? In some cases, there are things that are not there at all. And the fourth criteria was, well, is it picturesque? In other words, you go there, is it pretty? You take nice pictures and so forth. So all those together, and there were a few sites which came with the same exact score, so it had to do a finagling. And I guess you could have been done with 27 pieces of paper, and you figure, oh, is this one here, that one there? And you come up probably with the same ranking that we've come up with. So that's the thing. Now, you're going to say, well, this is kind of tacky, top 27, it's going to be like a countdown. Yeah, a little bit like that, but still, we think that this is something worthwhile doing, even if it did mean getting bitten by bugs and all that kind of stuff. So where are we now is the question. Well, based on what you've seen so far, you probably don't know. And that was the whole idea, of course. But if my videographer were to just turn a little bit off to the side here, we'll show you where we are. And we are at Blairstown siding. We're a couple of miles west of the station at Blairstown. And this is the remains of, I'm not going to go all the way over here, but this is the remains of the water tank that was here on Blairstown siding. And you can see up here, oh, I got cobwebs, so I'm not going to go over there, but you can see 1911. Obviously, that's when it was built. There were 4 tracks here at one time. The siding was discontinued or ripped out. There were 2 sidings, you know, 2 main tracks, east and westbound. Well, this would have been eastbound, westbound. And then there were sidings westbound and eastbound. This served as a stopping place, really not for very long. It was apparently ripped out in the 1920s. It was one of 3 places on the cutoff where there were water tanks. It would have been a 50-foot water tank here, long gone. The other 2 places were at Greendale siding, and then one at Port Morris. Interestingly enough, maps have this particular water tank as being near the station. It's not. We're not really near the station. And so, as a result, everything considered, picturesqueness, accessibility, importance, what does it look like now? This is the bottom of the list of those that we put on a list. We're going to have a few honorable mentions that I guess you could say even below this, but in terms of the 27 we're going to do, this is the 27th. So, onward next on to number 26, which I think you will see as much more recognizable than number 27, but we had to start somewhere. So, on to number 26.
Okay, here we are at number 26. I forewarn you that there's a reason for this being at number 26, and this is the Lehigh and Hudson River Railway underpass under the cutoff, under the Pequest fill. It's significant. Unfortunately, you can see that it's a dumping ground for all sorts of stuff. Some of it identifiable, some of it not. At some point, this is going to be a trail through here, a contiguous trail with connecting into the Sussex branch and such. This is a 32-mile long right-of-way, and which was owned by Mr. Jerry Turco at one time, as a matter of fact. And this tunnel could have actually accommodated 2 tracks. It only accommodated 1, which I believe was on this side of the right-of-way. A bit of trivia, which I think I mentioned in the video of rails under and over the cutoff. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt came through here on September 1st, 1944. He was visiting his friend Lucy Rutherford over in, that would have been considered Alamucci. The 2 Roosevelts actually went under the cutoff. One, the other Roosevelt, being Teddy, I believe crossed under over in Portland. I'm not sure that he was president at that point. And then a little bit of trivia in terms of on the cutoff, there's only one candidate, wasn't a president, but one candidate crossed over on the cutoff. That was Adlai Stevenson in 1956. He lost to Dwight Eisenhower, so he never became president. Anyway, I'm doing anything here to talk about something other than the condition of what we see here. This will be cleaned up at some point. They'll take the fence down. There's some dispute about the ownership of the tunnel area underneath the cutoff. But at some point, this will all be fixed up and won't look like this. Unfortunately, right now, it looks like it does, but, well, that's why it's at number 26. So, hopefully things are getting a little bit better when we move to number 25. Okay, let's go and find out. Well, here we are at number 25, Johnsonburg, New Jersey. As you can see, everything is overgrown. The station, what is left of it, which is only the foundation of the station, is inside this bunch of brush here. Why does Johnsonburg get such a low score? Well, there's almost literally nothing here anymore. There are no buildings. There was a creamery and then an ice house and also the station. There was also, in that direction towards Armstrong Cut, I call it like a section house or freight house type of thing. That's gone as well. There's no sign of that. So basically, in terms of scoring a particular site like Johnsonburg, it doesn't do well at all in terms of what's here. I mean, in terms of significance, it was a relatively significant place in terms of the cutoff overall. If you look in the grand scheme of things, however, its significance drops over time. The ice house goes away. The creamery, there are photos into the 1960s, which I think it's still operational at that point. At least it looks like it is. But in terms of any kind of activity here, whether it be freight or passenger, that's pretty much gone by the 1950s, certainly. Jerry Cruz talks about his mother commuting from here. It would have been a flag stop. In other words, there'd have to be some kind of indication for the train to stop. It wouldn't normally stop necessarily unless there was a passenger waiting. And that's going into the late 1940s. Johnsonburg, the town of Johnsonburg, is over that way. Not too far away, but as the crow flies, but not really sure how people got from there to here. This is where Jerry Cruz saw the runway in 1958. He would have been standing somewhere in this area, the runway of cement cars, which we talk about in our discussion with Bob Bars and John Sabatka. How, there are different accounts as to what exactly happened, but Jerry Cruz was here. He saw it. He saw the cars go by and then the engine chasing it. So that's part of the history. In terms of accessibility, well, Kears Corner Road is right next door, right over here. So accessibility-wise, it's not too bad. It's pretty good. Picturesque? Not really. It's all trees and really can't see anything here. So overall, that's why we end up on a list of 27, aside from whatever honorable mentions we may have that are beyond the 27, that Johnsonburg ends up at number 25. Here we are at number 24, which is the County Road 602 grade crossing, Brooklyn Stanhope Road. This was created in 1990. The tracks will go across here, and that's in the direction of Port Morris. The tracks really go, what has been laid so far, the tracks really go to about where that gate is above, right over there. And that's roughly where the old County Road 602 went under the cutoff. That's been abandoned since that time when they created this, well, what will be a grade crossing. Okay, so that's number 24. Now we move on to number 23. Here we are at number 23, the Byram Cliffs, which you would have just seen. We are located between County Road 605 and Lake Lackawanna, all of this within Byram Township. The cliffs continue on for quite a distance and actually get much taller than this at some point. We'll show you a photo taken back in the day facing towards them when you could see without all the trees. Roseville siding is also here. The thing is that this is, as you can tell, of all our various 27 different sites that have been chosen on the list, this is the only one where the tracks are here. They've been replaced, and I'm taking advantage of it as a seat. There's going to be no train today, I can assure you, so I'm quite safe in doing this. At some point there will be trains, but once again, not today. The cutoff actually follows the cliff, and the reason why I even picked out the cliff as one of the sites is that not only is it a little picturesque, but also significant from the perspective of the cutoff, because several of the different routes that were going to be, I'll say, vying for the possibility of being the final route followed the cliffs. Rather than having to blast a whole bunch of rock down, the Lackawanna decided to, well, in this one particular case, this was and also an exception in this regard, to follow the topography of the cliffs, as opposed to trying to basically blast them down, which they, I guess, decided that wasn't such a good idea. And since they kind of bring the line in alignment to where they wanted to go anyway, it kind of made sense not to fiddle with nature too much, other than having to build a fill on which we are standing here and which Roseville siding is also on. So that's number 23. Now let's go on next to number 22. Hi there, we're in Armstrong Cut, number 22 on the top 27 sites on the Lackawanna Cut-Off. Armstrong Cut, or we also have mosquitoes as well here. Armstrong Cut, to orient you, westbound towards Blairstown, eastbound we're maybe a third of a mile or so from the Johnsonburg station site. What's significant about Armstrong Cut? Well, the two largest cuts, in other words, on a railroad, unless you have absolutely flat terrain, the railroad, in order to lessen the grade, would either put the right-of-way on a fill, in other words, an embankment, or would have to dig or blast through rock or hills and such to create a cut. Well, this is a cut. It's really a massive cut. At the very top, it's over 100 feet deep. Now there are two major cuts on the cutoff. This one, Armstrong Cut, and then also Colby Cut near Roseville Tunnel. They are related in a sense because in 1941, December, I believe, there is a massive rock slide that takes place on this side of the cut. Now what happens is that this rock slide occurs at night. Now, Johnsonburg at that point is no longer a passenger stop, but they did have someone stationed. I don't really know exactly why they were here, but they were in either the freight station or it wasn't a section house, I don't think, but a building over about midway between here and Johnsonburg Station. And they're there at night, and they hear this tremendous crash, and they come out here, have to walk out and see what happened, presumably with a flashlight, and they see that the whole side of the cut, which both sides were like this at the time until this one comes down, and it comes across the right-of-way, it pushes, there were two tracks at that time, and pushes them out of alignment, such that no train would be able to pass through, much less you can imagine a train coming through. Well, this would be at night. It's quite possible you could have no train was going to be stopping in Johnsonburg, so it's going to be flying through at 70, 80 miles an hour as a passenger train. Hitting this out of alignment track, it would be catastrophic. Even if it was a freight train, of course, it would be catastrophic. But so the story goes that the watchman, or whatever he was, has to call the headquarters or has to get in contact with the headquarters at Hoboken to stop all the trains and make sure that nothing comes through here while this is in this condition. The problem is he can't directly contact Hoboken, so he actually has to call, I believe, Andover Junction on the Sussex branch. And then whatever it is, the agent there calls Hoboken and says, stop all trains on the New Jersey Cut-Off, and that's what they do. So this is out of service for a whole month. The trains all of them are rerouted via the old road, via Washington, Oxford, Delaware, New Jersey. While they take this down, basically they remove the extra rock material here. And I'll show you a photo that when I was here in the 80s, I climbed up here, I'm somewhere up there, looking down towards the right-of-way. You can see how it's angled back. You can't really see now because there's so many trees, but take my word for it, they didn't touch this side as far as I'm aware, but that side they did. Now, in terms of Colby Cut, what's the relationship between this and Colby Cut? Well, Colby Cut by Roseville Tunnel, after this occurs, remember when this occurs, this is right around the time of after Pearl Harbor, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the attack on the U.S. Forces in Hawaii, that you have this, I'll say this hypervigilance that occurs, and I don't want to say paranoia, but strong concern, let's put it that way, for other places like this where you might fear that either they naturally or by sabotage would fall down. Well, the other place that is like this is Colby Cut. And when we're in Colby Cut, we'll talk about Colby Cut. But the thing is that I'm not a geologist, but I'll theorize that what happens is when this cut is made, and of course this was at one time just one big rock outcropping. When the railroad created the cutoff through here, they blasted out all this. Well, it might have weakened that side, but that side's been behaving itself over the years, but it obviously weakened this side. And over the 30 some odd years after the cutoff is built, with freeze and thaw, and this is December, so it might have been, you've got water inside the rock and it freezes and pushes out, and all of a sudden everything lets loose. Well, that's what happened. That's my explanation. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but it's probably a plausible explanation. Anyway, that's Armstrong Cut. So that obviously, is this an important place? Well, yeah, I mean, this was a big project to get through here. And it is what it looks like, or what it did for the most part. So is it picturesque? Well, no, but that's why it's, we're still, pretty high up on the list, or low on the list, depending on how you look at it, at number 22. So our next stop will be number 21. Let's move on to that. Okay, here we are at number 21, Tunnel Field, as you've just seen the sign. Why is it Tunnel Field? Well, there's a tunnel here. What's this tunnel for, or what was it for? Well, when the Lehigh and New England Railway was planning its route through this area, it was looking to build its own line. Starting back in the 1890s, it had trackage rights as a railroad over the New York Susquehanna Western, which went underneath the Paulinskill Viaduct, which is just off to our left, and circled around and went through the water gap up into the Poconos. Well, the Lehigh and New England wanted its own railway, at least up until the point of where its railroad was up here, up the road a piece. so that basically it was running on its own rails, so to speak. That never happened. So at the time that when the cutoff was being built, you can see the date stamp up there of 1909, the Lackawanna was obligated to maintain this right-of-way just in case. As it turns out, the Lehigh New England never completely built its right-of-way. There are vestiges in different places. There is here as well, but in most places either was never built or you can't tell where it was. Nevertheless, it went underneath here. This spot is unique in a way in that we have a second tunnel which goes under the same fill. This one's for Route 94 now. But these are the two tunnels, quote unquote, which are most close together, shall we say, in terms of their location. So that's number 21. Onward to number 20. Here we are at number 20, the undercrossing of the Sussex branch under the cutoff. That's the Pequest fill above, but actually because we're on a fill here, and particularly on the other side, which is a very tall fill on the Sussex branch, that tall fill is overcome by the tallness of the Pequest fill itself, which is higher on the list. I'll just give you that much of it as a hint. The last time here, if memory serves, almost got hit by a bicyclist. This is the Sussex Branch Trail. It is a bicycle / hiking trail. Actually quite nice to have this. As you can see on this side of the tunnel underneath the cutoff is clear. This is where the trains would have gone. The Lackawanna, when it built this, might have thought there was a slight chance that the Sussex branch would be double tracked. That never happened. But in building this tunnel, they left I'll say the left side with the native rock. They didn't clear that away, so that's in its quote-unquote natural state there. So that is the Sussex Branch undercrossing of the cutoff. That's number 20. Now let's move on to number 19. Here we are at number 19, Andover station stop. You say, well, number 19 is kind of like low for what you would expect to be an important place. Well, yes. I mean, this list that we're looking at, the list of 27 spots on the cutoff, is reflective of what is there now. So what there is here now is not too much, really. I mean, you have the cutoff, but where the parking, the station, all that kind of stuff is going to be is not here yet. In the future, it will be here. So, but nevertheless, if we do this list again after the cutoff is reactivated, yeah, this will be much higher up on the list, I'd say, no doubt. So, but this is number 19, the New Jersey Transit station stop, the future one, at Andover. So that's number 19. Let's move on to number 18. Here we are at number 18, Greendale Station. This is one of the two stations on the cutoff that still remains. In other words, that the station building still is here. Johnsonburg is the one which is no longer here. I was thinking not to so much impugn my system of ranking, but when I was thinking about, wow, you know, Greendale came out to be number 18, I thought that would have come up maybe a little bit higher. But in looking at and I haven't really gone over these numbers in detail with each of the individual sites, but on this one it's just a little bit curious, because when I look at it and you look at Greendale, which also includes the tower, which you can't see here, but the site is, I would include both here. For significance, I gave it a 17 out of 25, which is, you know, slightly above average. A 15 on the present condition. And present condition, you'd have to say from the perspective, well, not just that there aren't any tracks here, but the station itself is boarded up, but that's to secure it. But also any of the ancillary type of structures are no longer here as well. There was a stockyard. I'm not sure what else is here off the top of my head, but the station building is the only thing that remains. And even the overhead bridge is gone, which kind of added to the ambiance of this particular setting in its original form. So things have changed. So I guess an argument could be made. And once again, when I went through these numbers, I tried to be as objective as possible. The accessibility is a 15 as well. So that's kind of, you know, average, I guess you would say. And then also the picturesqueness, which I kind of lost points there. It's, you know, about a 10 out of 25. So I guess that explains why it ended up as number 18. Nevertheless, it is a place that, in terms of if you're planning on visiting different parts of the cutoff, this is one place I would suggest you stop off and take a look at. It's really been improved, and I give a lot of credit to the Lackawanna Cut-Off Historical Committee, and in particular Steve Kelmer, who has done a wonderful job in clearing it off and also making sure that the perimeter has been secured and the building itself has been secured. So overall, you know, it's a positive story, but it's got a ways to go. So when it's fully restored, then the numbers are definitely going to go up. So that's number 18. Onward to number 17. Here we are at number 17. What you just saw is the culvert under Lubber Run fill. You can see it's a pretty wide fill. And the water that's going through here is Lubber Run. That's why they call it Lubber Run fill. On the other side, where you can maybe just barely make out the dam, that dam holds back Dallas Pond. Then the water flows underneath Lubber Run fill. Here it is. Goes this way. and continues to Lake Lackawanna, which you can't really see, but is quite close here. This is basically, technically, I guess you could say, is part of the lake because it's not really flowing here. But so this was created by damming up Lubber Run further down, because if you look at old photos, this does not exist other than the stream. There's no lake here. There's no Dallas Pond and there's no Lake Lackawanna. So that's number 17. Now let's move on to number 16. Okay, as you can see, we are at Hudson Farm, Suite 16. This is the spot which has delayed the section to Andover longer than anything else. Probably about 4 or more years of delay, having to do with an underground pipe which need to be replaced. It actually goes underneath the barn here. The way I understand it, the barn will be removed, the pipe will be installed, or actually replaced and installed, and the stream which is being carried underneath here opens up here just down beyond that second fence down yonder, and then continues not more than 500, 600 feet, I guess it is, to where Andover Station is down the road here, Roseville Road. So that's Hudson Farm, number 16. Next, number 15. Here we are at, well, I know where we are. This is Wolf Lake. Just checking which number it is. Number 15. Okay, so this is number 15. The cutoff, you can see the fill here. I think technically this is considered to be Lubber Run fill, but we're very close to where Wharton fill begins, because Roseville Tunnel is not that far from here. This might be the remnants of Pumpkin Run, which was the tributary which basically, well, makes Wolf Lake, because all of this here has been created as a result of dams that have been put up. There's been a dam that's been put up not only to create Lake Lackawanna, but a dam next to Lake Lackawanna that creates Wolf Lake, which in turn, well, I think there's a separate a separate dam which makes Wright Pond, which is on the other side next to Roseville Tunnel. There are lots of lakes here, which makes for a rather picturesque place to when you come through here on a train, whenever that happens. I predict this will be one of the picturesque spots, and that's why this particular spot gravitates up a little bit in the list, because of because of picturesqueness. It's not significant per se, but it's actually quite picturesque. So that's number 15. Onward to number 14. Here we are at number 14, Colby Cut. It's very difficult to make out exactly what is here we'll show you a photo of where there were a lot less trees here. Essentially, the cut is like this. This side of the cut is really the taller side and is just a little bit over 100 feet deep. And in terms of rockfall mitigation, this is where the rockfall detectors were, and when New Jersey Transit is going to reactivate the line and have to do construction not only on the tunnel itself, which is literally beneath me right now, and also Colby Cut, one would think most of the mitigation is going to be on this side, and historically that's where it was, although possibly on this side as well. C.O. Johnson Park is on this side. A nice trail goes down to the tunnel itself, kind of a winding thing. It's a former narrow gauge right-of-way that was used when they were taking rock from above here, because the plan was originally this was going to be a cut. Where I'm standing right now originally was not planned to be here. It was going to be one giant, enormous cut, but that didn't work out because of the way the rock was found to be unstable, and therefore they decided to make a tunnel instead. So that's number 14, Colby Cut. Now let's move on to number lucky 13. Here we are at number 13. This is Port Morris Tower, otherwise known as UN Tower. Those are the telegraph call letters for the tower. What can I show you here? Well, let's take a look around. In this direction, facing towards Lake Apatcon, which is about a quarter mile away, the signal controls operations in and out of the yard here, which we're now going to go over and take a look at. This is the temporary connecting track to the cutoff. Port Morris Yard in the distance, you can see, I'm counting, looks like at least 7 New Jersey Transit train sets. Waiting for the morning commute. And here we are right on the cutoff. You can see how the temporary track goes in and then goes straight, and well, when the permanent track is put in, it will be here. So Port Morris, historically a very large yard, 80 plus acres of land. It really was downgraded at the time of the Erie-Lackawanna merger, 1960. Until then, it was really a major point of operation on the Lackawanna. And it became dormant really for quite some time, and then was rejuvenated or reactivated, whatever you want to call it, in the mid-90s by New Jersey Transit. And they use it for their Montclair-Boonton line trains here to store overnight. So that's the real Cook's tour of Port Morris. At the far end of, which we're not going to go to here, but at the far end, just where those trees are, they start parallel to the cutoff, is approximately where the Morris Canal crossed many, many years ago. It's been gone almost 100 years now. So that's number 13. Let's move on to number 12. Here we are at number 12 on the best sites to go look at on the Lackawanna Cut-Off. This one's a little unusual, actually unique. First of all, I'll point out where we are. This is Simpson Road, today's Simpson Road, but it's significant from the historical aspect, not from the Lackawanna Railroad or Cut-Off perspective, but because this was the right-of-way of the New York Susquehanna and Western, which passed underneath the Paulinskill Viaduct, wound its way around through the town of Columbia, ended up here, and then went out into Stroudsburg and up into the Poconos. That was abandoned about 1940, so this has been a roadway for a very long time. Now, what I want to also point out, since we're here, and this is a more somber subject, certainly, and reflective of a tragedy which took place almost 40 years ago, I'm going to have my videographer follow me. And we're going to go down here by Route 80. This is the memorial for Trooper Philip LaMonaco, who was killed during a traffic stop not even a mile from here, east on, well, westbound on Route 80, but east of this location. That was December 21st, 1981. He is gunned down, he's murdered by two fugitives who, after the trooper is shot, get off into their car and start going down Route 80. Well, there are trucks and cars which have at least seen part of this, and they try to push them off the road. This is Mannings and Williams. They're both fugitives from justice at this point already, even before this. They get off the road down at the next exit, which is literally just at this curve here. And they wind their way, I don't know that they know where they're going, but they wind their way up to Haynesburg River Road and Route 94, and they get onto Station Road, and it's either has snowed or is snowing. That they probably are literally within a stone's throw of the of all of the troopers that are eventually going to be part of a manhunt that's going to take place. And it's going to be several years before they actually catch these guys. One is caught in Ohio, and I forget where the other one was caught, but they were caught quite a distance in time as well. But this memorial was put here, I believe, at the 25-year anniversary, which would be 2006, and as a somber reminder of the risks and the dangers of being a police officer. So that's it here for number 12. We now move on to our next place or site on the cutoff, number 11. Here we are at number 11, the Roseville Road Bridge, the new Roseville Road Bridge, as you can see from the date stamp on top or along the side of the bridge. This was completed in 2017. This is the only bridge on the cutoff which has been torn down and replaced. The original bridge from 1911 was on a slightly different alignment. They straightened it out a little bit so you can go a little faster over the bridge. The original bridge was kind of ugly looking. In fact, I think it was voted like the ugliest bridge in New Jersey, or had some sort of dubious distinction like that. The new bridge is actually pretty nice, and they've tried to make it as historically correct as possible, and down to the point where it actually looks like it's looks pretty good. So that's number 11. Let's move on to number 10. Here we are at number 10, Port Morris Y, and also we're going to look at nearby Musconetcong River. You won't be able to see it, but I'll just point out where it is. Orient you, or maybe a half a mile west of the tower at Port Morris, and the yard is up that way. You can see the derelict Alp 44s, which are being stored here, and all the track and all the ties that would be needed. I don't know if it's, certainly I think the track is almost enough to get to Andover, and then the ties as well. That's, well, I'm not sure if it's enough, but I know Port Morris Yard has more ties. So either way, there are enough ties to lay the track, the remaining 3+ miles of track that are needed. Plus the Y here. This is the Y track. The Y track kind of just curves off to the right and would go into Port Morris Yard. That will be relayed as well as part of the cutoff project. And now I'm going to walk over in this direction. Now, how did this end up as number 10? Well, it's significant for a number of reasons. The connection, there's a little bit of picturesqueness which you can't really appreciate from right here, but the rivers, well, I can see the river, but it's a little bit difficult to, I won't ask my videographer to come over here, but it's actually quite nice. And then just in terms of the location, certainly, in terms of Port Morris, I'm thinking of just briefly covering the 1958 runaway, which would have come through here, starting up a little ways back where I was. Maybe I'll just wander back real quick. Because although that location where it started from is not one of our top 27, I'll just mention it then in the distance, because you can see there's a little bit of a grade, but as you get up towards the end of the trees, towards the yard, it's a flat spot, and the cars were sitting there, but part of the string of cement cars that would run away in August of 1958 were on a little bit of a grade, and that was enough for them to start moving this direction and keep on going. And the next stop was the Delaware River, basically 30 miles away, because it's actually beyond the end of the cutoff. So that's number 10 on our hit parade. Let's now move on to number 9. Okay, here we are at number 9, which is County Road 605 in Byram Township, Sparta Stanhope Road. Physically standing on the new bridge, which was built maybe about 15 years ago or so. The original bridge, which you just saw at the beginning of this very segment, is the original 1911 bridge. They're near each other, but what happened was that because the original bridge, which is very narrow, one lane, the county, Sussex County, decided to, instead of filling in the bridge, which we of course didn't want to have happen, to put another bridge here. And you can see the bridge abutment over here. So the cutoff runs underneath here. It's quite a long bridge underneath. And it replaces the old bridge and realigned the road, because the road went around and like that kind of thing. So anyway, that's number 9. Now let's move on to number 8. Okay, here we are at number 8, the County Road 521 bridges over the cutoff in Blairstown. Originally, there was only one bridge, and it was a narrow bridge. Well, it still is, because the first bridge you see here, just beyond that yellow and black sign there, that bridge dates from 1911. What happened during the 1980s, after the cutoff had been abandoned, there were efforts in different places, and this being one of them, to try to fix or do something about this bridge, because where I'm standing right now is the original Route 521, Warren County Route 521, and it would come in and do a real sharp turn and go over that bridge, once again, that closest bridge there. There were complaints about school buses and the whole thing, that it was dangerous. Now, one proposal at the time, once again, this is mid-1980s, was to take the bridge out and fill it in. Well, that would be a big problem, because that would block the right-of-way. So the proposal that was put out by our group, North Jersey Rail Commuter Association at the time, with support from the county, the town, and so forth, was to keep or maintain this particular crossing. Now the question would be, well, what would be done to replace this? Would there be a new bridge put in, or as what has happened, and this happened, it opened in November of 2006, a second bridge was built, and that bridge is just beyond the first bridge. You can see it by the other black and yellow sign there. The two of them now comprise basically what is one bridge, and the road has been, the curve has been lessened, so you have the southbound traffic going on this bridge, just like that car is right now with the bicycles, and then the northbound bridge would be this car that's coming towards us right now, the white car going across. And so you have two separate bridges, but they look very close to each other in terms of their, historically, they look very, very close to each other. And that's why this got a pretty good high rating, because in terms of what is here, in other words, in terms of the appearance, the modern day appearance, they look brand new. So so it got high marks for that, and it's important. It's picturesque, not too bad. I mean, back in the day when the all these trees weren't here, you could get a nice view of the valley, but no, not so much as it used to be, but still. So overall, that's why this is number 8. So there you have it. We had a few deer that we had to chase out to, well, they didn't chase them out, but they kind of were here, and now we've taken their place. So onward next, on to lucky number 7. Okay, well, welcome to lucky number 7, Slateford Junction, just south of the Delaware Water Gap. Obviously, this site got really high marks for picturesqueness. Where it kind of lost out a little bit was the fact that what was here is no longer here. Maybe someday, at some point, it will be back, but there's a couple of tracks, and you see looks like at least 1 or 2 tank cars that are sitting over here at the junction, what used to be the junction, standing on a bridge that no longer exists, at least at this point in time. It'll have to be replaced. And it just a bit overgrown, to say the least. Accessibility, well, it's pretty accessible. I mean, the road's right here. Obviously, somebody over here wanted to get a real good and close look at Slateford Junction. A little bit, maybe too close a look, but that kind of stuff can happen, I guess. What else can I say about Slateford Junction? Well, Slateford Tower, which we included in the entire mix here for this site, totally obscured by foliage. It's there. Not in the best of condition, but it is still there. That's good news. So that adds to what is here, but it also takes away in terms of in terms of its present condition. So anyway, this is number 7. This is we've been here a number of times before, and no doubt we'll be back at some time in the future. So next, we move on to number 6. Here we are at number 6, Blairstown Station. This is the only station on the cutoff that continued to be a passenger stop all the way up until the beginning of 1970, when the Erie-Lackawanna discontinued passenger service on mainline passenger service, cutoff being part of the quote-unquote main line of, well, first the Lackawanna, then later the Erie-Lackawanna. In terms of its ranking, well, as you can see, the station looks in pretty good shape, and it is. It's now what they call a CrossFit facility, which is an intensive form of exercise. I'll just put it that way. In terms of what is here, you can't see it, but beyond the station itself is a freight station. That building still exists. For the period of time after the passenger service ended, this became a radio station, and was for, I'd say, about 25 years, maybe a little bit more, as a matter of fact. And then the radio station moved out, and it became a recycling center for a while, and now it's, as I mentioned, a CrossFit facility. What else can I say about Blairstown? Well, this would be the platform, or where the platform was. The westbound main line track would be there, and then the eastbound, which some of the ties and ballast are still there. When 1958 they tore out this, that stayed. So this is the one stop that would remain west of Andover on the reactivated cutoff. So there would be 2 stops, Andover and then Blairstown, and then after Blairstown, west of here, would be whatever would be the next stop in Pennsylvania, probably Water Gap, I'll say at this point, East Stroudsburg, somewhere there. So that's that. We can move on to number 5. Okay, here we are at number 5, Roseville Tunnel. Just a tad over 1,000 feet long, 1,040, 1,025, depending how it gets measured. This is the big ticket item in terms of the New Jersey Transit project for the reactivation of the line from Port Morris to Andover, Andover is maybe just under 1.5 miles from this location right here. You can see some of the places, if you look really closely, where they blasted through. The plan originally was to have an open cut. It would have been a massive thing, and that was abandoned a little over a little bit over a year into the project because they found unstable rock, and the decision was made to have a tunnel. So the Lackawanna Cut-Off got a tunnel out of all that. So this is one of the major sites on the Cut-Off, is accessible from C.O. Johnson Park over in Byram. This is actually physically located in Byram Township in Sussex County, New Jersey, and is accessible by a right-of-way, which is an old narrow gauge right-of-way that is quite convenient. Brings you from the top of the tunnel down to the bottom, or from the bottom up to the top, either way. So this is Roseville Tunnel. So that's number 5. Let's move on to number 4. Here we are at number 4. You can see the sign here for the Lackawanna Cut-Off, but the reason why we're here is not for the sign so much, but for what's behind the sign. You can see the trees up here in the distance. Well, they're sitting on top of the Pequest fill. Number 4. Now, as we get towards the top of the list, and certainly now we're towards the real top of the list, things are pretty important. And the Pequest fill was extremely important to the building of the Lackawanna Cut-Off. It allowed the Cut-Off to cross the valley of the Pequest, which is a little over 3 miles long, on what at that point was the largest railroad fill in the world. It contains over 7 million cubic yards of fill. Now, a cubic yard is about, well, it would be by definition 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. If you want to talk about metric, that's basically the same as a square meter. Well, imagine something like this, over 7 million of those, and that's what is contained in that fill. The reason why it's so important to the building of the Cut-Off, the Pequest fill allowed the Cut-Off to cross here and basically keep more or less a straight route between Andover And the first curve is just a little bit before Johnsonburg, so it's about 6-7 miles straight track. Otherwise, the alternate routes that might have been used would have had to either have gone south and then come back up. President Truesdale is attributed to being the one who thought of, why don't we build something across this valley? That may be apocryphal, but that certainly is a story that's been out there for as long as the cutoff has been out there. And as a result, the Pequest fill, basically beating a dead horse now. It's obviously a key thing to the cutoff. Now, in terms of its present state, it's overgrown, and as a result, you could say, well, where's the best place to go see it? Because these different sites along the cutoff, for the most part, you just go to one place, whereas the cutoff, you have a choice. It could be here in Andover. You could go over to the Sussex branch. You could route 206. You could go west of here. There's also the crossing of the Lehigh and Hudson River Railroad. There are numerous places that you could see it, but we chose this one since, well, we get a sign firstly, but in terms of evaluating its importance, yeah, it deserves to be way up there on the list. It's obviously one of the most important things about the Lackawanna Cut-Off, and it's, in my opinion, worth a visit. So that's number 4, Pequest Fill. Let's move on to number 3. Here we are at number 3 on the greatest sites on the Lackawanna Cut-Off. The underpass underneath the Delaware River Viaduct for the Lackawanna Old Road. It's currently Norfolk Southern. By the condition of the tracks, it looks as if the train hasn't been through here in quite some time. Why is this significant? Well, it's significant because this is at least at this point in time, is the only active railroad that actually, technically active, that passes either above or below the Lackawanna Cut-Off. Behind me is Portland, Pennsylvania, a couple miles down the road. In that direction is Slateford Junction. Why is it significant? Well, obviously because of the railroad and the connection with Slateford Junction, but also you look at it from a picturesque perspective. You can't really appreciate it from this perspective, unfortunately. There's a no parking sign here and a lot of no trespassing signs. There's been quite a bit of an effort to discourage people from going up onto the viaduct. But in any case, if you were on the viaduct, or if let's say we didn't have the foliage right now, you probably should be able to see the Delaware Water Gap from here. So from a picturesqueness perspective, it's a high ranking. Accessible, obviously it's accessible. Yes, also the importance now that present condition, well, it's hanging in there, but it needs work, and that's going to be part of the rehabilitation that'll take place with reactivation of the line. So that's number 3. So next we move on to number 2. Here we are at number 2 on our list of top sites on the cutoff. The Haynesburg Viaduct, Paulinskill Viaduct, Haynesburg, New Jersey. At one time, the largest reinforced concrete structure in the world. It's about 117 feet from the river level up to the level of the top of the track. 1,100 feet long. It is, as you can see, unfortunately obstructed by a lot of trees, And as a result, I have to say, in terms of all the criteria that have been applied, unfortunately, that is the one thing that it brought it down a bit, and means that our number one, which is coming up, I think if you're familiar with the cutoff, probably you can already guess what it is. But we'll get to that momentarily. But nevertheless, I mean, this is a marvelous structure, and a number of cars are almost always here looking at it, no matter what time of year it is. We've been here so many times before, I don't know if there's much I can add, but it is pretty much the signature structure on the New Jersey cutoff, in spite of the fact it's only number 2, so number 1 is still coming. But before we go to number 1, there are some honorable mentions that I want to go over, because even though they didn't make the top 27, there are a few that I think are worth mentioning. And I'm going to go from east to west. The first one would be the crossing of the Morris Canal, which crossed at Port Morris Yard, just at the far western edge of the Port Morris Yard, crossed the cutoff and also crossed the Y track. There's actually some remnants, or there's some signs, if you will, of the abutments of the bridge that was on the cutoff. It was only the only bridge on the cutoff, the only structure on the cutoff that wasn't entirely made of concrete. What's left is concrete, but the bridge itself, we believe, was made out of steel and then was removed when the Morris Canal was abandoned in 1924. As was the case, would have been the case with the Y track. We've never been able to find any kind of sign of exactly where the canal crossed underneath the Y track. We kind of know where it would have crossed, but there are just no signs of it, so it's difficult to say. It'd be nice to find it, but I don't think going out with a pick and shovel at Port Morris Yard would probably make New Jersey Transit very happy. So that's the first honorable mention. Moving a little bit west, just a little bit beyond the 605 crossing, the Sparta Stanhope Road, thank you, County Road 605 in Byram, there is, I don't know what to call it. It looks like it looks like a glorified huge barbecue, but obviously it wasn't that. I have some old photographs of it that show it in much better condition than it is now. It might have been like a kiln or something associated with the cutoff, because it's literally very close to the right-of-way. So one would presume that it had something to do with the construction of the cutoff. Don't know for sure, but we'll show you a photo of that. The third honorable mention is Bear Creek, where it crosses underneath the cutoff a bit west of Greendale. There's nothing significant other than the fact it's a rather attractive, pretty site, a spot to be, but it's a little bit of a walk from Greendale, or from Johnsonburg if you want to go in the opposite direction. That's the third one. The fourth one is, which we've covered in the construction of the cutoff video, and that is Molasses Junction. If you remember, we talked to Marion and her son Jim there. Now that's on one side of the right-of-way, would be the north side of the right-of-way. The south side is actually kind of interesting, pretty, where there's a stream that comes through. It actually goes underneath the road, but it's kind of interesting, but it's not a place where you can just wander around. You probably just drive by if you do that, but it's an interesting spot. Mount Herman Road, that's considered Blairstown there, Vale. That's number 4. And number 5, well, we're right here at number 5. It's this foundation here. And this doesn't have anything to do with the cutoff per se, but it was actually part of the New York Susquehanna and Western, their operation. We think it was possibly a small creamery. Not 100% sure what this was. We have photos from in the mid-20s, 1920s, where we see that it has just burned down it's not clear exactly what happened, but there might have been an explosion. I know one version of the story is that there was sparks off of one of the steam locomotives and set it on fire. That sounds a little bit far-fetched given the distance between this structure and up above here on the bridge. But whatever the case is, I don't think we have any photos. If I can find them, I'll certainly put them in the video. If the structure before it blew up or burned down, whatever the case may be. So, and I should mention that the New York Susquehanna Western would have come right through here. So that would explain why that is there or was there. So that's number 2. Let's go on to number 1, the top site on the Lackawanna Cut-Off. Okay, here we are, number 1, Delaware River Viaduct. Maybe not a big surprise. It would have been probably between the 2 viaducts, you would think. Why did this one get a higher ranking? Well, I mean, from the perspective of its importance, it's really just as important as the Haynesburg Viaduct. It's certainly, from the perspective of its present condition, is about the same. And you can see there's spalling, there's some deterioration. This is going to be one of those things, one of these projects is going to have to rehabilitate this bridge. But in terms of picturesqueness, you have the Delaware Water Gap nearby, and the accessibility, well, it's quite easy to get to be able to see it, both by Route 80, although I would not recommend stopping on Route 80 to do so. You might want to consider going to the Monaco Memorial. That's one possibility. But overall, the most significant structure and overall, with all the different attributes, the number 1 site to see. Now, at 1,450 feet long, 67 feet from the top of the rail to the river, it's a significant structure, of course, but its role in terms of what it meant to the railroad was significant as well. So, the word significant keeps coming up when you talk about this particular structure. So, that's it. Those are the 27 plus a few honorable mentions, the different sites on the Lackawanna Cut-Off. And so that's the end of part 27. I hope that you look forward to part 28 on the Lackawanna Cut-Off.